The Square Ball Podcast.
Well, welcome to the show. This one is brought to you in association with Levi Solicitors. Michael, do you think?
What thing? The reading that?
Yes.
Right. Yes. Do you want 15% off some legal services?
I'd love some, yeah. Which three would they be?
I'd probably go for lasting powers of attorney, conveyancing and wills.
Right, and what's the discount on those quickly?
15, that's what I said.
Yeah, when? Until when?
End of October.
31st of October, Levi's birthday month. We thank Levi's for their continued support. You can get 10% discount on your legal fees and all the other services. levisolicitors.co.uk/the square ball. Full details and terms on the website. A special Square Ball podcast today. Me and Michael in the studio, and we welcome George from Not the Top 20, a fellow podcast in the pod sphere, I suppose it is, whereas you talk about the other 19 clubs. We don't even entertain them, George. So justify your work.
Yeah, so we cover the whole of the EFL. So whilst you guys have to just talk about one game after a weekend, we have to do about 45, which makes Monday mornings quite busy. But yeah, focusing normally the first half of the shows in the Championship, and then we do League One and League Two afterwards, pretty much ignoring all draws unless a leg spinner does for a keeper in the 97th minute. Then we might talk about it.
Turns out there are divisions below the Championship.
I remember it well.
Do you?
I've got to be honest. We spent a few years there.
Oh, did we? Right. Okay.
It was a good laugh for a little while.
Yeah. Well, we are off the back of the Sunderland game is the most recent Leeds one. I was engaged for moments last night with Bradford against Newport, I have to say.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Seconds, only because it was in Bradford, and I am from Bradford, so
It ended 1-1. I did see that.
did it?
I'm pretty sure it did.
Right. Did you watch that one, George?
Ended 3-1.
Did it? Okay.
There you go.
Yeah.
It was 1-1. It
Yeah,
was 1-1 at
3-1.
some stage.
We're
It was 1-1 with like 10 minutes to go.
We're such wannabe Premier League arseholes, aren't we?
Well, we don't want to be, but we do as well.
I know. Yeah. This is true. It is
Former
what
Premier League Bradford, though, trying to get out of League Two at about the 18th time of asking.
they helped us into the Champions League. In fairness, did Bradford when they were back in the Premier League?
They did, didn't they?
But anyway, to business, which is we are in the AFL, we're in the Championship, and we are attempting to get out of it yet again, up towards the top end. So the reason we've got you on is to have a chat about that, about Leeds' bid and what you view from the outside, because you guys predicted at the start of the season that we would win the division. So do you stand by that prediction, and what do you make of Leeds United's season so far?
Yeah, definitely stand by it. I think with Leeds, there seems to be a huge disconnect between how Leeds fans generally feel their club are doing and what the perception's like from the outside, where, if you think back to the beginning of the season before a ball was kicked, Leeds were bookies' favourites to win the league at kind of 4-1, 7-2, and they're now even money favourites. So in the perception of the bookmakers, and probably something that I'd agree with, the percentage chance of Leeds winning the league has gone from about 20% to about 50% since the first ball was kicked. Whereas it kind of feels like in the minds of a lot of Leeds fans, that chance has actually gone down. So I think that there are kind of multiple factors within this. Obviously, the results themselves haven't been incredible. Leeds haven't blown away the league after 9 games or so. But I think when you look at the competition that Leeds have got in order to try and win promotion this season and win the league, it looks like a much weaker division, certainly than last season, to the extent that how Leeds, the perceived strength of Leeds and what happens to Leeds United off the back of Jorginho Rutter and Crescencio Somerville leaving, maybe being seen as being weaker, might not actually negatively impact their chance of going up this season compared to last. Coupled with the fact that actually, if as frustrating as it is as a Leeds fan to concede a ridiculous own goal like you did on Friday night against Sunderland, as annoying as it is to see, Callum Lang hit an unbelievable strike on opening day, to concede 2 penalties. These are all kind of things that don't really necessarily suggest there is like a systematic issue with Leeds United. It's more just weird, wonderful ways to manage not to win games, which might have been a bit of a hallmark of the club over the last few years.
Yeah, since about 1919, I think, to be perfectly honest. Our ability to self-sabotage is wild, but I don't think we're the only club that does stupid stuff. And, in this division, it's a very, very even division, isn't it? And teams do daft things all the time, and defences are not great, I think we've realised. But I think our ideas about our own club have been skewed just by recent history, the last few seasons, but also then the previous sort of 15, 16 on top of that.
Yes and no. I mean, the fact we got 90 points last year, which would have been enough to see us up in more or less every single one of those seasons we were trying to get out of the Championship, but it wasn't enough. I think maybe makes us almost a bit distrusting of the underlying stats of the the eye test tells me we're probably the best team I've seen in this league, and the underlying stats basically say the same at the moment, but still a bit of me goes, but
I was going to say we objectively know it, George, to be true what you said then about where we sit in the pecking order here and our chances of getting out in this division. But there is just there's that intangible, that unknowable, that Leedsiness, I think, that has affected us and our ability to see sense when it comes to this division.
And I guess that could be the thing that ends up, being the issue. You've got to think back to last season where there was nothing Leedsy about that run of form at the turn of the year where you won a record amount of games consecutively. But then when the kind of push came to the shove and Leeds went title favourites for about 5 minutes. And it's basically as soon as that happened, suddenly, the promotion bid went off the rails to an extent. And then even at Wembley, where you go into that game is kind of expecting probably to win it, it was a poor performance. So I understand why as a fan base you have this perception of we might look good and the underlying numbers might be good, but we'll have a way of screwing it up. I mean, the one thing I'd say is that I personally don't really believe in identities of teams necessarily. I think basically every fan base thinks of their team are rubbish at corners. Basically every fan base thinks of their team always concede last minute equalisers or anything else. When in reality, it's probably easier to find identities within managers, for example. And in Daniel Farke, you've got a guy who, before he walked into Leeds, had twice successfully navigated a side out of the division. So, last season, the reason why Leeds didn't get promoted automatically was because of Leicester and Ipswich, really. Like, the points tally was good enough to get promoted in basically any other season. So, given the way you've started this campaign, and given that, to my mind, as good as Sheffield United have been from a defensive point of view, and they have been very good, like the only team really comparable with Leeds in terms of defensive chance prevention, I guess. There don't look to be teams anywhere near the quality of Leicester, certainly. The promoted sides, of which I'm a fan of one of them, we aren't Ipswich, so I don't have to worry think about anything like that. And even Southampton, I would say that those are the four sides from last season in the Championship would absolutely walk this league. So even if the players that you've lost mean that there is a slight drop-off, I'd still say that you are comfortably the best team in the division, both in terms of the performances, but also personnel. We've
analysed it from a perspective of saying that the standard in the Leeds squad has probably dropped a little bit because it has to have done, doesn't it, given the amount of talent that we've lost. However, the drop in the standard of the division is probably more than the talent we've lost. So it's kind of adjusting your brain to that idea, I suppose. Do you see in Leeds then, what do you see Leeds' strengths as being? You've mentioned the defensive solidity there, not giving up many chances. That jumps out to me. What else do you see when you analyse Leeds from a neutral point of view?
I think Leeds follow the trademarks of a lot of successful teams where, if you look at the top end of the football pyramid, and you look at Man City and Arsenal, for example, it's their attacking players who are the stars and have the individual quality to win games. But the cornerstone and the foundation for their good performances and their successes and what sets them apart from other teams around them is their defensive unit. I think Leeds fall exactly into that, where people will naturally look at Willy Gnonto, for example, as being someone who just should not be playing football in the division. Brendan Aronson's come back into the side at a championship level and looks too good at times as well. And so Leeds follow that trademark of having a foundation and a platform by which you effectively that within games you're not going to concede many chances, and therefore you have the individual quality in advanced areas to make that count. And that is normally the kind of, if you know going into games, going to a season that you're not going to ship 50 or 60 goals, and yet you have players within the final third who you're not reliant necessarily on assistant manager in order to get the best out of them, because that you can get players like, even you look at the Firpo goal from Friday, where Firpo and Gnonto linking up on the left hand side, two players who just in terms of their technical ability shouldn't that are not destined to play second tier football for the majority of it. So yeah, I think that's generally you see teams who get promoted out of this division following that similar hallmark, which is people focus on the stars, but actually the foundation from success comes in deeper areas.
Do you see any areas of particular weakness from the outside?
Not really. I mean, I think when you look at the injuries that have come in the last couple of weeks, and suddenly I guess you look a little bit short in central midfield. But then before the injuries came themselves, and you would never have said that was an area that needed improving. I think in Ethan Ampadu, you can basically go through the team. Ampadu's another one whose technical capabilities and qualities set him massively apart from this level. And these are all players where if Leeds don't get promoted this season, they came to the club in the Championship, well, not in the case of Nonto, but certainly in the case of Ampadu, thinking this would be their ticket to playing regular Premier League football because they knew that the ambition and the desire of the club to get there. But if you don't do it again soon, these are players who are going to be picked off very quickly by teams in the league above, as you saw this summer by two of your best attacking players being signed for big sums by teams who in the Premier League who are looking to be aspirational Premier League clubs. So I mean, there are going to be weaknesses within the side, and right now I think central midfield is one of those. I'd also argue that as promising as Joseph is, you probably wouldn't mind having a seasoned, striker who you brought for £15 million who scored goals at a regular level in order to take the burden off him. Because I think Peru is maybe not poor recruitment, but not necessarily is the player that you thought you were going to be getting. I think he was the one when you signed him where you believed you were getting a top level championship striker, and it hasn't really worked out. I'm not sure his off the ball work really suits the way that Daniel Farke wants to play. So yeah, in terms of if you're looking at January and you want to spend some money, that's probably the area where I'd look to be doing so.
It's interesting is Peru, where we seem to have found this niche for him now, where I know he started against Sunderland on Friday, but coming off the bench when games start to get stretched, it seems to benefit him. Because like you say, he's not the most mobile, but he just knows where the back of the net is. And if maybe that's his role within this team, then absolutely fine. But I think we started to sort of crystallise those thoughts. And then he put him in the starting 11 at Sunderland, and it seemed to work absolutely fine. So maybe they are adjusting the way that they play certain games anyway, at least, to suit Peru.
It was quite a change of shape as well at Sunderland because we had Rothwell and Tanaka. We didn't have, traditionally two holding midfielders, essentially, is the way Farke was preferred to set up. So it did kind of change the whole way we played. So maybe that was playing into Peru's strengths a little bit more, although I don't think the attacking third changed drastically, probably.
No. I mean, yeah, what do you think of him as a signing then? You say maybe he's not the player that Leeds needed. I know I've heard your analysis before, yourself and Ali, when you've sort of spoken about the work that Patrick Bamford does. And I suppose Joseph is kind of a hybrid of the two almost. He seems to know where the back of the net is, although he's not quite found his scoring boots this season yet. He seems quite raw. But he puts in a lot of the work that Bamford does. Is it a runner that you think that Leeds needs up front?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, it was interesting. Obviously, there was that huge conflict, I guess, between Farke and the fan base in the first half of last season around who between Ruter and Peru should play as a 10 and who should play as a striker. And it was all kind of came down to the off-the-ball work. And, with Peru, I guess it's always a little bit risky when you sign a player who has scored a lot of goals. But, Peru's a player whose long-range scoring regularity for Swansea was a big part of his game. And it's always a bit of a red flag, I guess, when you sign someone who's shown themselves to be good at long-range shooting, because generally that tends to level itself out a little bit, and that seems to have been the case with him. I mean, I think with Joseph, you've got someone whose talent is very clear, and I have no doubt that the goals will come relatively soon, even if I was quite surprised to see him put in as the bookies' favourite for the top goal scorer in the Championship this season before a ball was kicked. But it's where the Leeds have the luxury in a season where, given the teams that came down, it seems very unlikely to me that there are going to be many Championship campaigns that are as winnable as this one and are going to present as good an opportunity to get back to the Premier League as this one. Do you have the luxury of effectively blooding a youngster in order to improve them? And he will improve in order to lead the line for you in a promotion season. I think Daniel Farke would have loved it had Joseph hit the ground running in terms of goal scoring and the questions weren't asked. But, as you say, his work off the ball and his quality on the ball as well. I think he's someone who's very, very good with runners off him, which obviously you guys have an abundance with the wide players and Aronson as well. So it seems a pretty good fit to me. But as I say, I could have prepped prior to this to come up with some names, but it does feel like a talismanic striker for Leeds, and someone who Leeds fans can buy into their previous goals as well, would be an area that maybe could be the difference. But I don't think it'll be an issue, and I'm sure you're not reliant on one goal scorer in order to get goals. We've seen that already in terms of the goals being shared out around the pitch, and I'm sure that will continue.
It's interesting that because I can see parallels from many, many years ago when in 1990 Leeds signed Lee Chapman in was it January we got Chapman, and when Ian Baird moved out, because obviously this is pre transfer windows era. I can't quite remember exactly when it was, but yeah, essentially brought in Lee Chapman as a bit of a grizzled Championship bastard, and they just pumped the ball towards his head and said, go get us promoted, score the goals to get us up, and he did in the end. So
that was the Kiefer Moore argument last year, wasn't it? When people were saying, "Oh, we should have just gone and got him in January to get us over the line."
Just that little bit of extra something. But I do wonder if there's the willingness to do that from Leeds' perspective, with Joseph and Peru and Bamford still in the squad, and Bamford on presumably very, very high wages.
I think we've
where do you guys sit on Bamford? I'm intrigued to know, as someone from the outside, what you guys make of Bamford at this stage in his long Leeds career.
We spoke about him the other week, didn't we? Actually, and I think it's a thing that's coming to an end. I think there's been a deliberate policy decision within the walls at Leeds United to move on from the Bielsa era players. They've gradually all been sort of moved out. He's one of the last, I suppose, and he's on a big Premier League legacy contract, which suggests that they've not been able to move him out. I'd heard some discussion about that being a possibility this summer, that he was perhaps one of the players they were looking to move on. It feels like a thing that I think is coming towards a natural end. And I wonder, Michael, do you see a player in him that's kind of fallen out of love with it a little bit and maybe hasn't responded well to the questions and the stick about him missing chances from the fan base?
I think the missing chances has always been there, and the last few years as well, just the fitness issue as well. Like, he's not someone that we can rely on anymore or build a team around, because for all of his faults under Bielsa, he was someone that was very clearly part of his plan, and he would have always been in Bielsa's first 11, whereas that is clearly not the case anymore, and I think nor should it be, because I think we probably got more out of him last year than I expected, because he just seems physically broken.
Yeah,
like he's barely played this season. He started pre-season injured. He got injured again quite early in the season, and it just seems to be the way it's going to go with him. And I think he's got this and one more year left on his contract, hasn't he? That was obviously given off the back of a 17-goal Premier League season. Yeah. And even building in the relegation wage drop, he's still likely on £35,000 a week.
Yeah, and I think given the financial implications of not going up this year, he couldn't stay next year. I don't think they'd have to find a way to move him out. But I don't know. Yeah, it just feels to me like a thing that's moving towards a close, George, truthfully. I can't see them renewing him based on his injury record. I suspect, and this goes back to what I said at the time when we discussed it, he will be viewed better with the passage of time, because he was part of something, part of that Bielsa team, and the amount of running and work that he did. You know, the misses will start to fade into the background, and the injury record will start to fade into the background, and he'll be remembered with the passage of time, I think, better and more fondly than maybe he is now, because the injuries are a frustration, as you say, and the missed chances are a frustration.
I think it helps to take pressure off him as well, that he's clearly not the first choice anymore, because at points it's felt like Bamford or nothing, and that has maybe weighed on him a little bit too much. And he's always been, the last few years in particular, he's always been coming back from an injury as well. So then when he's not looking sharp, you've always got that excuse of, well, he's only really been back for 5 or 6 games, but then he misses a chance, and then he gets injured, and it just feels like this cycle that continues of there's no form, there's no fitness, and I guess there's no peace within the fan base about it either, because there are people who will say, well, he's obviously trying and he does a job that no one else can do, but then you can't get around the fact that he misses some very big chances.
And yet in the stadium, he still gets loads of support.
That's a testament to Leeds fans, isn't it? I think. I don't think there'll be many. I mean, I guess it's a legacy of what he did previously. But
we are really nice as a fan base.
We are good. We are really,
yeah, exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm just trying to get invited back.
We're just the best, aren't we?
We've got to see how Melié's treated on his return. I'll just to go to that end of the pitch, given it's the kind of big topic of this week. Where do you rank him in the Championship in terms of the goalkeepers? Because I feel like we don't quite know, do we? Like, he's occasionally brilliant, and then he occasionally is, as he was on Friday.
It's so difficult, because I feel like keepers like him get much more stick. I mean, he's one of those goalkeepers who make saves that probably a lot of keepers in this league wouldn't make. And yet the areas are so obvious that you're naturally going to get a lot more stick than a keeper who maybe doesn't make saves other keepers would make, but rarely makes mistakes. Again, if you look back through your goals this season, you haven't conceded many, but the own goal on Friday, the Sorensen shot, the equaliser against Pompey, where if it's their first shot of the game, you've just taken the lead. If that doesn't go through, and then it's probably a different game entirely. it wasn't that long ago. I remember after you guys were promoted out of the Championship, it was all about whether or not Manchester United were going to sign him to replace David De Gea, and the career trajectory off the back of that has obviously been pretty steep downward curve. So I kind of agree with you. I don't know. I think often keepers like him get more stick than they necessarily deserve, and he's clearly someone who has his raw ability is very high. Friday night was just one of the strangest moments I think I've ever seen in a game of football, where that doesn't happen. That happens at any time in any game. It's crazy, but for that to happen in the 97th minute, probably the last ball that was kicked in the whole game, if he just picks it up and launches it down the field. And I don't understand how you can legislate for that. And for him, he's going to have to have some serious, mental fortitude in order to bounce back and not let it affect him, because normally with a goalkeeping error, you can kind of make an excuse for it. But in that case, it was so unique that it's hard to get away from. Although it was kind of strange that with all the cameras there wasn't really a great angle to see what the ball actually did off the turf. We never really saw it, but obviously you could see by the way he reacted as if it was, turned off from leg stump outside off.
Yeah, it is a weird one, isn't it? We were talking on the show on Monday, and I mean, I don't even know if we're classing it still as a goalkeeping error. Your brain says it has to be, because I kind of want him to go out and dive on that, but I also understand why he didn't. We were saying, like, because you've seen that bounce, 1,000 times. You just, you let it bounce, you catch it. That's just what a ball does. And then suddenly it just did that. And then people who were behind it said it took a real turn off. Yeah. Off to the right.
Had to have done, otherwise,
I mean, in which case you kind of go, you have to hold your hands up and go, well, okay, fair enough. It happens, and of course it happens to Leeds in the 97th minute, because we're awfully special little snowflakes, aren't we?
As you say, in different circumstances, that if that happens if that's their equaliser at 1-1, the game ends 2-2, it is definitely forgotten about more than the timing of it of in the 97th minute, because, like you say, the game's won. Everyone's sat there thinking, we just need to win this first header or get the ball clear, game's over, and then all of a sudden, from absolutely nothing, it's in the net, and there's no way back from it given the timing of it. So it's unfortunate in a lot of different ways.
As you were saying, actually, Michael, when we spoke about this on Monday's show with Beren Cross, and I hadn't thought about it like this, because I asked the question of whether we were being a bit unfair to Meslier, as you've kind of touched on there, George, as well. Are we being unfair on him because he does some absolutely amazing things as well? And I said, what's the standard by which we're judging what is good and bad here? And you said, Michael, it's his own high standards. And I hadn't thought about it like that. I thought we're judging him against other keepers in this division or Premier League keepers, but actually, yeah, it's his own ability, which is so high when it's good, and then that happens, and you just, well, to the point where it's inexplicable.
It's the frustration of seeing someone be capable of moments of brilliance, versus,
such as the save for the first goal,
versus the horrible lows of stuff like that. I mean, I think keepers we've had in the past, someone like, we had Paddy Kenny, who is like the archetype of a Championship goalkeeper, who rarely made many absolutely amazing saves, but equally would generally catch crosses, was just fine at most things, was like a solid 6-7 out of 10 across the board as a Championship goalkeeper. Meslier has got some 10s, and he's got also some 1s in him.
How do you rate him from that perspective then, George? Do you think that's an accurate representation of what we see from him? Yeah,
I think it's exactly right. And now, in this era where there's kind of stats and everything, you can put a number on that, where you've got the goals prevented tally, which kind of tells you over the course of the season how these things, how they even themselves out. And just having a look at last season, he didn't rank particularly well. He had a minus goals prevented, which means that over the course of the campaign, he let in more goals than one would expect from the shots he faced on target. So, that would suggest that he's a below average shot stopper based on last season, and would suggest that had you had an average keeper by Championship standards in goal, then maybe you would have picked up more points. So, but those, we see also with those numbers that things can change massively season on season. Like there was a campaign a couple of years ago where Marco Morosi's shot stopping stats in League One for Shrewsbury were off the charts, and the next season he was basically bottom. So it's not like a surefire way of analysing a keeper's shot stopping ability. But I think right now, especially for someone of his talent, we'd expect him to be an over and above average shot stopper at the level. He's not doing that. He's not a reason why Leeds are conceding fewer goals than they should do, and that's obviously what everyone's after in their goalkeeper.
And yeah, to reiterate that point, it's the same point we made on Monday. We've got a very, very solid defence by and large. It's just that goalkeeping errors are magnified well, by orders of magnitude, I suppose. We spoke about Farke's football. We've touched on it there in passing in conversation. George, what do you make of Farke's football? It was interesting hearing your analysis on that after we lost the playoff final. Listen to that episode that you guys did. I thought it was a very, very fair analysis. What do you make of its strengths and weaknesses and where it might take Leeds this season? Well, you've obviously predicted we'll finish top, so you think it's capable of winning as this division. Where does it sit?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't necessarily think that Wembley final was a very good advert for Daniel Farke's football because, it felt relatively kind of clueless, I would say, off the back of having gone 1-0 down, where you just couldn't really work out how to break down a low block. Presumably, you planned to play a game against a very expansive, free-flowing passing side. And when it transpired that isn't the way they wanted to set up, he looked pretty lost as to how to adapt to that. But I think in Farke's, we've seen it over a period at Norwich and definitely over the last 18 months or so at Leeds, that his football is both possession heavy, energetic out of possession, and restricts the opposition to very few chances. And those are, I would say, as a fan, three things that you generally will want to see. Like, in my mind, you analyse a manager's ability by basically what happens between both boxes. Like, are you, as a football team, creating loads of opportunities and preventing the opposition from doing so? If the answer is yes, I think the manager's doing their job, and I don't think they can be held accountable for whether it's the goalkeeper letting goals in that he shouldn't do or strikers missing opportunities. That in my mind, I don't think you can put down to him. So, I know that a lot of Leeds fans at periods have felt like Farke's time or Farke could be holding you back, but I would say that consistently, given as well that I'd say Leeds are a very, very good watch when things are going well, and he manages to get the best out of individuals, especially attacking players. And this isn't just Somerville and Ruter, but also you think back to Buendia at Norwich, and you think back to Pukki. Like, he has a track record of turning good Championship attacking players into players who do well at the top level, and that has to be down to his coaching ability and the way he sets his teams up. So yeah, I'm a fan. I mean, I think it's definitely a case to kind of be careful what you wish for Leeds fans who want him gone, because it's not easy to be a side who dominate most games of football that you're in, regardless of what the final score is.
Yeah, I think we've noticed, or I have anyway, and do you agree? And have you noticed from an outsider's perspective, George, that we seem to be passing it a little bit quicker when it's going well? We don't manage to achieve it all the time. There are certain games where, yeah, we've come up against the low block and it's not quite worked, but it feels like we are moving it a bit quicker and trying to pass through the lines a little bit more this season. Maybe they've learned from last season, or that the style has been honed a little bit more.
I'm not sure still. Certainly in moments we've seen that, but then I think there were moments of it last year as well. I don't feel like we've got quite enough data to go at this yet. Certainly the way the season started, the opening against Portsmouth, there was a bit where you were like, okay, this looks all of a sudden quite ambitious. From the end of the previous season, where felt like we got in our own heads a little bit and were too scared to do anything in some games. It did feel like we were just going at them in a way that we hadn't necessarily. The coming months will be interesting because we don't have holding midfielders anymore. So I think Farke addressed this in the post-Sunderland presser, didn't he, saying he's going to have to find solutions and work out a way of playing in a slightly different way to get around this. So it's sort of actually, without anyone wishing injuries on people, this is kind of what people have wanted. So let's enjoy it.
I like how that was posed as a question. It was a statement as a question.
Let's enjoy it until one of Rothwell or Tanaka is injured or out of form, and then we have no options.
Yeah, I know you cover the full EFL on your show, but have you noticed any little tweaks in style or any differences from last year, or does it look very similar to your eye?
I think personnel's kind of necessitated it, where I'm a huge Ruter fan, but there's no denying that he's a very unique footballer. And I think a lot of what you said there about maybe things happening a bit quicker this season is because Ruter was someone who would like the ball into feet, and he would often try things that were, he'd rarely play the percentage play. It would often result in losing possession. He'd often want to take a lot of touches. Having a player who is basically the focal point of all of your attacks and possession taken out, and you've got someone like Aronson who comes in, who's incredibly energetic and does things very quickly, is naturally going to mean that the way that your team looks is going to change. Similarly, you look at Somerville, who's someone who, again, always wanted the ball into feet and would his acceleration was so important to what he did, but he was a very cute footballer in tight spaces as well as being able to drift inside. Unlike Nonto, who is again does everything at a million miles an hour and is much more direct in the way that he attacks. So I'd be surprised if this is. I mean, it'll be Farke, I'm sure, playing to his team's strengths, but it feels like the personnel in advanced areas has changed, especially in possession. It's going to probably result in a different means of attack and it looking a bit different, the tempo being a bit different when you do go forward.
It'll be interesting to see how Leeds get on against Sheffield United after the break. Won't it? A good one to come back to. What do you reckon to that one as a clash?
It's the two best defences in the league, really. So I always worry with that it could be defences who come out on top despite the attacking talent on show. I think Sheffield United have shown in a couple of occasions this season that they are very, very happy just to let the opposition have the ball and to attack in transition, which I wonder might be the way that Chris Wilder sets up Sheffield United to play in that one, albeit against Luton on Saturday. They absolutely dominated the ball and were able to win it that way too. So I wouldn't want to put my neck on the line, but I have a feeling it won't be a game of loads of goals, where a moment of individual brilliance from one of the many, many very good individual players on the pitch could be enough to win it.
But Leeds are going to win the league. I just need to double check with you before we finish
Correct.
the show. Leeds are definitely. You've gone on record and said it. Leeds are going to win the league.
I'm not going on record and saying Leeds are definitely going to win the league. I'm going on record and saying that I think Leeds will win the league.
Do you know what? That's good enough for me.
It's fine. I'd even take second.
Yeah, me too.
Absolutely fine.
But I said it last season as well. So,
oh, you idiot! Why have you done that?
But then, in fairness, we got the 4 right before that too. So there's some form here for getting it right. I think
if any team can break it, it's us. But I know, again, it goes back
twice.
To the feeling of exceptionalism. But for whatever reason, Leeds do manage to be exceptional, but not in the way that we mean.
Yeah, it's rarely good, is it? Out of interest, where did you have Luton at the start of the season? Because I've been surprised. I'm just thinking of the last season and how all the teams that came down were very strong. Luton obviously have started really quite badly this year.
Yeah, we had them 6, I think. I mean, definitely in the top 6. I mean, there didn't seem, in my mind, to be a very good reason why the best team of the 3 that came down last season, who didn't lose loads of players, who retained their manager, would suddenly be as poor as they've been. But I was at Kenilworth Road a week ago today to watch my team Oxford draw 2-2 there. And we were by far the better team. We went 2-0 down, and then once it was 2-2, there was only one team really in it. It was only a red card to Luton, I think, saved them because they stopped throwing men forward so much. I couldn't believe how poor they were, to be honest. And they were poor against Argyle, losing 3-1 away. They were poor on Saturday at Sheffield United. So I definitely didn't see this coming. But right now, I mean, I think although I'm not convinced there are some of the elite championship teams we've seen in the past, the low bar feels quite high. Teams like us and Argyle haven't necessarily been quite as poor as I think most people thought we would be. And therefore, for teams like Luton, who are right now, I would say, playing as there aren't many teams playing worse than them, I wouldn't, unless they change their performances, I wouldn't put it past them being embroiled in a relegation battle unless things change pretty quickly.
What I will say is I would take a squeeze at the bottom of the division far more than a squeeze at the top of the division this season. If we could just keep racking up 2 points per game and leave people behind, that'd be fine by me.
Yeah, and we are there almost. It's early signs of that we've got it within us, certainly, for 2 points a game.
It's amazing, isn't it, how outsiders are more confident about Leeds United's chances than we are. But that's just the nature.
Always the way.
Yeah, it's just the way of the nature of supporting a team. George, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. Where can we find Not the Top 20? So
you can find Not the Top 20 on any podcast platform, Spotify, Apple, whatever you want to use. You can find us on Twitter at NTT20pod. And we also have a website, ntt20.com, where there's a free and a paid subscription there where you can find, we think, some of the best EFL written content going. We're trying to improve the way that these leagues are covered, both in audio and written form.
Nice one. Sterling work that you're doing. And let's catch up again soon, perhaps in one of the other international breaks. And we will see if the prediction that Leeds will win the league.
Walk it, I think he said.
Is that what he said? Oh, that's what I took from it.
Yeah.
We'll catch up and do it again
10
soon.
points.
Oh, what a prediction. George, thanks a lot. See you soon.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
The Square Ball Podcast.